name is Brittany, just in case you didn't know who I am, and I'm a practitioner. And can we move? Thank you, Light. There we go. Today we're going to talk about sex and pleasure. Now, aren't you glad you're here? I think that there are those that could consider it kind of a taboo subject for a Sunday morning, but sexuality is part of our divine human experience, and pleasure is a quality of God. You don't have to plug your ears. So let's talk about it. So I'm going to start with how today came about. I honestly believe that God has a wicked sense of humor. Oh wait, did we miss that one? We did. This may not be true for you, but I really did believe that being an adult would involve far more sex. So how's that for some fun? All right, so in terms of God having a wicked sense of humor, today was set as a practitioner Sunday a really long time ago. And we decided as a team that it was my turn to speak. And so at the end of that meeting, I asked Reverend Lane, could you look up what today's topic is, please? You should have seen the look on her face. She was beaming as she came over and said, yeah, it's about sacred sexuality. Now, the whole room we had a little joke around that, but my first thought was, oh, heck no. Like, seriously, no. I was going to say, you know what, you guys, today is about sex, and have fun with that, and I was going to talk about something else entirely. Now, it's not that I don't want to talk about sex or sacred sexuality, because that isn't the case at all. Part of my reaction, and certainly my resistance, is because today comes at a really unique time in my life. For several years, and there are some in the room who know, I've been caring full-time for my grandmother as she prepared for her transition. And her care was a major priority for me, and I've been single for a really long time. So whilst hospice was super helpful, it's been a really, really tender time in my life, and my Grammy actually passed this week, earlier this week. So pleasure in any form has not been high on the priority list for me. And grief has been very, very present. And there's a contrast, a big contrast, between pleasure and grief. If the calendar had shifted just 1 week for Practitioner Sunday, I would have been talking about something else. And so my belief is that Spirit had other plans for all of us, and that today is just as much for me as it is for you. So, I invite you to think back when you were little. Did your parents have a code for sexy time? In my family, my folks would talk about going in their room to do the budget. And it was not until many, many years later that I learned that that was their code word for sexy time. And my sister and I never interrupted them, because who wants to do math on a Saturday afternoon? On a super ironic note, my father later became an instructor for Financial Peace University. It's through Dave Ramsey's organization. And so then doing the budget actually meant doing the budget. So we still joke in our family, are you doing the budget or are you doing the budget? So let's start with pleasure. What is it? The dictionary says that pleasure is a feeling of happy satisfaction and enjoyment, a desire or an inclination. Now, I dug deeper and I found, it's totally my favorite definition, in the Urban Dictionary. Here's what it says. Pleasure is a raw feeling inside every mammal in which the mammal enjoys the situation. So the desire for pleasure, the desire for sex, is primal. And sex is at the very, very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for survival. So he thinks that food, drink, shelter, clothing, warmth, sex, and sleep are the most critical of our physiological needs. And everything else becomes secondary until those needs are met. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not you agree with Maslow. Sexuality and pleasure are a part of our human experience. So, I love this one. Take that in for a moment. We get to be a little bit taboo today, which is kind of fun. Did you know that the benefits of sex on our overall health have actually been studied? Now, I would have signed up for that research study. Here's what they found in people who had sex 1 to 2 times a week. Reduced stress, a better mood, improved sleep, boosted immunity by up to 30%, improved heart health, enhanced intimacy, increased cognition, reduced pain, and lowered blood pressure. Now, I know what you're thinking. I do. I recognize that there are other things that you could do that would give you similar health benefits. But I seriously doubt that they're as much fun. And if they are, then by all means, do them, and often. All right, so this is my absolute favorite slide for today. It's just a tad taboo, isn't it? So given that sex is good for us and a part of our human experience, isn't it interesting how taboo it still is in many groups? Pleasure is often considered taboo as well. It's a topic that's been hidden, that's been judged, and legislated. So there are people who believe that it should be saved for marriage, who believe that it should only be done for the purposes of growing a family. There are those who believe in more than one partner at a time. And there are those who believe that rope should indeed be involved. You get to choose how you want to express your sexuality, and you get to decide your personal boundaries and explore what you enjoy alone or with consenting partners. And so my question is, have you done that? While this quote isn't directly about sexuality, it applies to our discussion. Here's what our founder, Ernest Holmes, has to say. God has imparted our life to us, placing no limitation or condition that would restrict us other than this. Our life must be lived constructively, in unity and love and sympathy with everything around us, if we expect to live it to the fullest. I believe that every person is born to be creative and to live to the fullest, to be happy and glad and prosperous and whole. Yes. He also said, anything that will enable us to express greater life, greater happiness, greater power, so long as it does not harm anyone, must be the will of us. And so I take that to mean that we are free to enjoy our pleasure in whatever form that it takes. You are free to enjoy your pleasure in whatever form that it takes. Just remember to communicate, set some boundaries, give yourself permission to receive more pleasure. It's our birthright. So now that we've talked a little bit about pleasure, let's talk about sexual energy. Sexual energy is our life force, creative energy. And since we know that everything is an aspect of God, we know that we are a part of God. And we know that our body is perfect the way that it is. So our ability to feel pleasure and our desire to enjoy pleasure are a part of God as well. And therefore sexual energy cannot be bad, but rather something to be celebrated and embraced. Sexual energy is one of the ways that we can feel alive and fully embrace our creativity. When we're using our sexual energy, we're tapping into the energy of creation and potentiality. Additionally, we know that we live in a feeling universe, and that our feelings are the fertilizer for the seeds that we've planted and the things that we want, and so we can be intentional about what fertilizer we're spreading. So I love this quote from Dominique Peters. She has a Facebook 21 Days to Bliss challenge. Let the orgasmic energy flow over and through you like a waterfall. Allow yourself to feel blissful, beautiful, and powerful. And I would add to that, because you are. How much more can we accomplish when we're empowered and satisfied? Really think about that for a moment. When we're content and happy in our lives. Now, this is a good time for me to add that pleasure can come from lots of sources besides sex. I find joy and pleasure in being at the beach, eating freshly ripened fruit, painting, teaching, writing, creating art. Everyone has a specific thing that feeds their soul and brings them joy. And these activities often can teach us about ourselves, can reveal deeper insights, and they can allow our soul to speak to us even when there are no words. So, this is an intentional creativity painting that I did in January. And I just want you to take her in for just a moment. The class was taught by Shiloh Sophia McLeod, and the title of this painting is Untamed, She Who is Wild and Delicious. This painting is very, very different for me. I did that one as well. So this is very, very different. I'll set that right there. Why is it different? Even though it's different, one of the things that was really interesting to me is that it flowed out. It came out super easily. There was no resistance, there was no inner critic, like everything inside shut down and it just came out. It's what wanted to come out on the canvas. She has bright hair. She has uneven features, and she speaks her truth. She's adorned with symbols and light. She doesn't care what you think about her. She's been told that she's too much, that she should tone down, and she's having no part of that. I've been in women's groups in the past where dormant archetypes are studied and sometimes reclaimed. Several years ago, I considered the archetype of goddess, but I knew that I was not ready to fully embody everything that that meant. My subsequent 2 paintings to her are not complete yet, but one is a warrior, and the other one is titled She Who is Limitless. Ultimately, the painting is a reflection of me and my unfolding. I am untamed. I am wild and delicious, and so are you. I'm expressing, embodying, and stepping into myself more fully. I'm doing my work and setting the groundwork to call in my next relationship. This is my favorite quote for today. Pleasure gives you clarity. It refreshes and rejuvenates. It keeps you ahead of the curve. Pleasure sends you on wonderful journeys, and you always arrive at your destination ahead of schedule. Regina Thomas Howard. All right, so now let's talk about pleasure as a spiritual practice. We can embrace pleasure as a daily practice, something that grows our happiness, our joy. Pleasure can be experienced through activities like enjoying a delicious meal, watching the sunrise, singing karaoke with your friends, growing a garden, engaging in consensual and joyful sex with or without a partner, or anything else that makes you feel good. Pleasure is always experienced in the present moment, and so by seeking out and engaging in pleasurable activities, we're practicing mindfulness and presence. Our bodies have nerve endings for a reason, and it's part of the joy of being human. So what's my guilty pleasure? The thing is, I never feel guilty about pleasures. Tom Hiddleston.
Is he single?
So let's talk about possible blocks to experiencing pleasure. When I invite you to embrace pleasure in all areas of your life, can you think of times where you've shied away from feeling pleasure or have felt guilt or shame because of your desires? And are those feelings necessary and true, or are you perpetuating things that you were taught? Is it possible to release the need to feel guilty for experiencing pleasure? Yes, it's absolutely possible. On Valentine's Day, I received a newsletter from Tampa Laporte. She's a whimsical mixed media artist and she's an online teacher. And here's just a section of what she wrote about self-love. More and more do I realize how so many of us suffer from self-judgment, self-rejection, low self-esteem, and low self-worth. I come to believe that it is one of the biggest things that stands in the way of growth, of abundance, of love, light, beauty, of living our dreams, and yes, even world peace. Low self-worth can cause depression and pain, and we know that hurt people hurt people. So today I encourage you to start practicing more self-love and compassion, more sitting with your feelings and allowing them to be, more forgiving yourself, more asking for help, more letting go of what no longer serves you, more being gentle and kind with yourself, more seeing your worth and noticing the amazing impact and difference you make in this world. Seek out and engage in everyday activities that make you feel happiness, joy, and pleasure, and know that by doing so, you're practicing mindfulness and co-creation with spirit. What if we all just commit to loving and enjoying our bodies as the prized, amazing, quirky gifts that they are? Steve Wolf. All right, so I'm going to close with an excerpt from Belonging by Tocopah Turner. This section is entitled Bearing the Pleasure. Our capacity for embodied pleasure depends on our ability to receive, which is like a muscle that can atrophy if it's been habitually contracted. A learned sense of unworthiness can act as a barrier against our well-being, keeping us from opening to the beauty that's around us. Whether it's our ability to receive positive feedback or expect things to work out in our favor, we may be distrustful of goodness even when it stands on our doorstep. But that doesn't have to be a permanent condition. With practice, we can learn how to welcome beauty and receive pleasure wholeheartedly. With the expanded capacity to receive comes the awareness of how long one has lived constricted, how long one has felt unseen, how long one has hidden their tender parts away from hostility and invalidation. Imagine the enormity of grief and gratitude that flow in simultaneously, stretching the receiving muscle. As the poet Nikki Giovanni says, we must learn to bear the pleasures as we have borne the pains. Bearing the pleasure means beginning to invite a gentle exploration of love into those jumpy places that anticipate pain, that expect abandonment, and brace for danger when it's no longer there. Instead of dismissing or armoring our vulnerability, we can begin allowing life into those areas that have been cordoned off in self-preservation. We must acclimate, often through grief, to the life-giving nature of love. For the person with a lifelong habit of contraction from receiving, a skillfully landed generosity can break the husk on the heart and release the grief of how long we've survived without their needs feeling seen. But know that this grief is a sign of healing and opening to those places which for too long have been declining love. There's a deadening that can set into the heart that has borne too much pain when a situation becomes too painful to bear. But over time, this protected way of being can have a sterilizing effect on the entirety of one's feeling alive. Coming out of numbness and back into feeling can initially be painful and jarring, like blood returning to a sleepy limb, but those pins and needles are a sign of life returning. The undamming of tears in your unfelt places are what Gibran calls the pain of too much tenderness. But this is a healing grief that restores fertility to your soil. As Wordsworth wrote, pleasure is an acknowledgement of the beauty of the universe. An homage paid to the native and naked dignity of man. Even thinking about pleasure brings pleasure. At any given moment, we can attune ourselves to well-being, which is a tributary of belonging. It's the place in our hearts where we're grateful for all that we're receiving, and for just a moment, want nothing more. Let's close by reading our affirmation together. I
embrace my pleasure and my sexuality today. All parts of me are sacred and come from God.
And so it is. So perhaps it's time to go home and do the budget.